How much of human history is our species literally trying to warn others of an issue, but it begins to just kind of be dismissed until it becomes an absolute issue, and then the phrase, well hell, I didn't realize it was that big of a problem. This must be new, right? Probably a lot. It's a humanity classic, and in the events of Wolfman, this exact same problem presents itself. Way out in the Pacific Northwest, or as I like to call it, the area I will absolutely go missing for long stretches of time in the future, North Bend, Washington, I'm talking to you, a disease is known to the indigenous tribes, but to the current occupants, it's called something else. This disease results in changes to the skeletal and muscular systems of the body, as well as many other areas. But what is this disease and how does it alter the human form? Let's discuss that in today's episode covering Wolfman from 2025. But first, this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Go to incogni.com/Roanoke and use code Roanoke to get an exclusive offer of 60% off. That is incogni.com/Roanoke and use code Roanoke, or click the link below to take your personal data off the market. So you know what's happening right now as you sit there enjoying a summer day, unless you're in Australia, in which case it's almost winter. A board meeting with your picture up on the wall is taking place as data brokers scheme on how to sell your data. How do they get it? Well, let's say you subscribe to just a free newsletter. That information is leaked, and now you're getting tons of spam emails. Or you registered for a loyalty card at a store using your address, and now you just get tons of junk mail that keeps showing up. Essentially, your information leaked and was sold to people who want access to it, like your name, social security, email addresses, or really whatever else they can get their hands on. But what's more hilarious is they're legally obligated to delete your information should you request it. The problem is finding it. That's where Incogni comes in. And now you can protect the whole family with Incogni's new Unlimited and Family Unlimited plans. Get extra level protection with Incogni's custom removals feature. In the Unlimited plan and Family Unlimited plan, you can point to any people, search site, or other website where your personal information is visible, and one of their privacy agents will take care of the rest for you. So if you're ready to take back your personal information, then go to incogni.com/Roanoke and use code Roanoke to get an exclusive offer of 60% off. That's incogni.com/Roanoke and use code Roanoke, or click the link below to take your personal data off the market. We kick off our story with rustling and crunching. A wasp is getting absolutely bodied by a group of ants as it starts screaming. I had no idea that wasps could scream, but I hate them, so it's totally acceptable. Also, fun fact, this is absolutely how it would go down with 100 men versus one gorilla. 4 men per limb on a gorilla, that's all it takes. We are in the remote mountains of Central Oregon in 1995. After several sightings of a lost hiker, members of the local community began speculating that he had contracted an animal-borne virus they called Hill's fever. But the people that lived there prior called it something else. Face of the wolf. Also, this is, again, the absolute ideal location. Can you imagine living in those woods? Beautiful. The clouds, the rain, the werewolves. Chef's kiss. At a farm, it's all security cameras, bars on windows, and nothing here is worth dying over signs. Hell yeah, brother. Someone then bangs on a wall as the son makes his bed, and he looks at the dog and then pets him. The dad and him are leaving to go hunting at 7 a.m. Again, it's like every part of this movie is a postcard. Dear Sarge, wish you were here. Alright, so I think you guys get it. His dad then talks about how the view never gets old, correct, and heading down to the river, they continue their hunting as the son goes to grab a death cap mushroom. It destroys your liver, by the way, so you might not want to eat that, my boy. The dad then crashes out about how this place is beautiful, but also dangerous. Like a hot chick with a spending problem. That only ends one way. While warning his son, he starts trauma dumping on the dude hardcore, like, brother, this is a youngin', and as he talks, they hear a twig crack as a deer approaches. Lining up the shot, the deer then walks off out of sight, and turning around, his son is gone as he ran to go chase the deer down. I mean, if you're gonna take your son hunting, you gotta expect he's probably gonna make choices to hunt. Like, you know, the animal that you came looking for. So looking out in the distance, he sees someone on the cliff's edge watching him. Looking again, he's gone as growling can be heard in the distance. Abandoning that spot, his dad then grabs him, completely freaking out, and again, good lord man, might be time for some Prozac. As dad takes aim, he hears something around them. Sending his son to go up into the deer blind, he then keeps looking around for whatever is making that god-awful noise. Crawling up to the deer blind with them, they hear something nearby as the dad watches the door with the ladder thudding, as clearly something is also crawling up. Seeing its breath, it starts hitting on the door, but he's so focused on that side, he doesn't see the breath behind him, as the deer then lets out a cry, which sends the creature chasing after it. Well, definitely time to leave the forest of magic and wonder in GTFO at this point. Spotting the deer, I know what's wrong with it, ain't got no guts in it. The dad then fires off a shot of the creature as it runs by. He tells Blake that it was just a bear in human form, and it was found squealing, man-bear pig. Also, I just want to point out, I think there are 2 of these things, mainly because the breath was at the front and then it appeared behind him. I guess it could have crawled around back, but I kind of doubt it. So calling a man named Dan later, he tells him that he saw it. He claims it was the hiker in the face of a wolf. He reports it's real and given it went after his son, he wants to go and find it and put it down. He requests Dan help, which now Blake runs upstairs because his dad realized he was living inside of the house. It is now 30 years later. Well, that's a hell of a leap. Yo, it is 2025 though. Blake is with his daughter as in they are living in a city away from the Wolfman. She jumps down and immediately runs into a homeless dude. He yells at her, standard Portland situation of course. Although I do think that they are in California, so you have to sit, they're like, oh, we gotta drive across the border later. Anyway, standard California situation as well. I've seen some wild stuff out in Seattle. Walked through crack smoke clouds, witnessed a dude laying hate on the sidewalk, saw a couple getting frisky on the road. But I think California is probably worse. The West Coast in general is a pretty wild place. So putting on makeup later, she says he looks creepy. His wife then comes home, dropping the mail off as his dad has officially been ruled deceased and he was given house keys to the house. Hit hard by this, he tells her to take the phone call in the other room, but she doesn't listen. Man, this guy's wife and child don't listen to him. Continuing on her conversation, like he's not trying to communicate a need to her, she then tells him to not do that. Oh yeah? Well, you guys have similar haircuts. Got him. So he explains to her that his dad has been missing, so enough time has passed that he has been declared deceased. He talks about how he didn't really know his dad and how he regrets never, actually talking to him about it. So yeah, Charlotte, feel like a jackass for not walking into the other room on the phone call now? This is sort of like when you're trying to show someone something, but they're on their phone and you tell them to look and they take like 3,000 years to do it and completely miss what you were trying to show them. I have no idea why, possibly due to experiencing that for an extended period of time with some people in my life. But I gotta tell you, it is exceedingly frustrating. So finding Blake outside of her office the next day, he brought her lunch. So this is like awkward for a married couple, right? They don't look happy with each other. So predictably, he's like, are you happy? And she's like, yeah, I am. And judging by the way she looks, not sure I'm 100% on board with that one. He doesn't know if he's happy, but her and Ginger are the only family he has left at this point. He wants them all to go up with him to Oregon and then spend the whole summer up there. The house is stunning, and he goes on about how a hidden valley between the mountains is near the farm. She says she can't just leave work, but he counters with, take some time off, like 3 months. Oh yeah, good point. So off to Oregon, to the mountains they go, where just north, sparkly vampires reside. So, Oregon's known for the werewolves. Washington's known for the vampires. California's known for hobo fight rings. It's all coming together. So as they drive to the farm, would you look at that forest? As they play 20 questions, they behave as one giant happy family, not focusing. Blake gets lost at the first turn. I suppose after, well, let's see here. He was like 12 in the events of hunting, so 6 years later he left. I guess that'd be like 24 years. Yeah, about 24 years since he's been there. So I reckon I'd forget which turnoff it is as well. So checking their phones, they have no service. Well, you are in a forest way out in the backcountry. It'll happen that way. As Charlotte then looks out, she sees someone horrifically standing in a deer blind. Making their way over, Charlotte talks about how he has a force multiplier, and I'm gonna be real with you, that's not really that big of a deal. It's fairly typical for hunters to have those. So as Blake says his old man's name, Derek then says he's been gone a long time. It's Dan's son. Blake then goes on saying he's lost as he's informed that he thought this was his dad's driveway, but it's actually Derek's. Derek then offers to take them to the farm as Charlotte then jumps in the back as Derek takes shotgun, much to the dismay of Charlotte. Also, I just want to point out, this is one driveway with turnoffs. So it's not really Derek's driveway. It's also Blake's driveway. Derek's a weird guy. So continuing on, it's already nightfall as Derek then asks, how long do they plan on staying? Except you gotta get in character. We say, so how long do you plan on staying? Claiming it's an acquired taste up here as there are animals and diseases in the area. Charlotte then says they are tough as he says, well, you don't seem tough. Like, okay, bro, I know you've been in the woods for a while, but being a total weirdo about everything ain't helping. So as they keep going, this guy is like a total buzzkill as he keeps behaving very strangely as just completely weird as all get out. So Blake says his job is to be a dad, and Charlotte then offers up her job saying she's a journalist. Probably the worst job that you probably could have told this man. So continuing on with their painfully awkward drive, someone appears on the road as Blake then immediately crashes the truck. Nice going, bro. Look, here's all I'm saying, right? If I'm on a mountain road with a sheer drop on the other side, in the immortalized words of Mystical, I'ma tell you like this, woman of non-reputable behavior, you better not walk in front of my tour bus. I am 100% running someone over who is standing in the road. If I was going 20 miles per hour and you are standing there, that means you are likely trying to ambush, which good luck with that with a multi-ton chunk of metal heading towards you, brother. Now, obviously, if it's like, you know, a youngling or the elderly, it might be a different story. But if you're just a full-grown man standing in the middle, you could stand to the side if you don't want to be run. I don't know. This sounds really bad. So after riding the truck down the side of the mountain, how are they up in a tree? How did you manage? So anyways, Derek then opens the door, not looking down, and immediately falls out like 15 feet or 4.5 meters in heathen units, because I had somebody who was European the other day say, hey, can you bring back the meters? Yes, I can. So anyways, as everyone then starts yelling, it becomes a problem. They get on top of the truck as Blake then looks out and sees something crawling on the sides of the truck towards him. He gets the door closed as a hand then breaks through the window. Looking down, Derek is torn apart and dragged off. I do not remember this part in Harry and the Hendersons. Getting to the back of the truck, Blake then helps down his daughter as Charlotte jumps next. And I get grabbing Ginger, but Charlotte, why didn't you just climb down while Ginger was jumping? Like, you wasted time not wanting to jump because it was up high. What is happening? So starting their hike out of there, Blake says, oh, I recognize this area. Just like the driveway, they're going to die for sure. Finding his dad's place, they then hear growling as they all start sprinting towards the house with that thing chasing them. Getting inside, they get the door closed as it starts beating on the door. Checking the doors and windows, everything looks locked up pretty well. As then finding a flashlight, Charlotte is now sitting down, which, bro, you gotta be ready to rock. Why are you sitting down? It is still at the door as Blake then goes to check in the basement, and I cut in to say, yes, the meter is still running. Hitting the fuse box, he fires up the generator, which gives them power once more as the lights then turn on. Well, I guess your summer getaway is not going as planned. And deciding it's best to kind of wait there until morning, Blake looks out the window with a flashlight but sees nothing. Ginger then asks if that other man is dead. Yes, completely, without a doubt. Your second grade teacher, also dead. And I hit your dog on the way out of the city. Everyone you love around you is dying. Gone forever. Shamelessly stolen from Scary Movie 3. So he gives her a pep talk on how he's there to protect her, and he asks her what is he thinking right now because she's supposed to be psychic. Not really sure if I conveyed that earlier. She tells him he's thinking about how much he hates mom's haircut or loves his daughter. It's your pick. They definitely have the same barber, is all I'm saying. Coming over, he then tells Charlotte they need to cover the front door, and he says it was an animal, but when he saw it, it looked like it was standing on 2 feet, so bear with mange. Grabbing a bookcase, Charlotte then asks if it'll hold. Well, if he had help, he could probably get the heavier furniture in place in front of the door. You know, team lift. Just a thought. So deciding to call for help and then head to the basement as he asks what that smell is as he sees Wagyu in the basement in what appears to be a freezer. Sniffing something, he says he found jerky as then he eats it. Ugh. As he bites it, his tooth cracks out of his mouth. That's not a good sign. Putting cotton in his mouth, which, you know how like people talk about nails on the chalkboard? Kind of bugging them, like it's just like that visceral feeling. Cotton in your mouth, I don't know why that does that to me. Like seriously, it's straight up activates my almonds so bad. Jimmy's rustled to the side. She sees that his forearm is actually bleeding pretty good as he says he cut it on the window. She says it doesn't look like he got cut by glass though, and cleaning it poorly and wrapping it, I guess it's better than nothing. Man, that Carhartt jacket did very little to help. So here we can kind of jump into the symptomatic presentation as we have now seen something, and he is in fact wounded during the attack, which means he was exposed to this disease. Blake's sense of smell has increased quite a bit already, indicating that there is more activation within the olfactory bulb. The olfactory bulb resides just inferior to the frontal lobe and being quite near the nasal cavity. Nerves that are within the nasal passage are used, again, as chemoreceptors to pick up certain scents. Now, typically a human sense of smell is not all that great, and that is due to the actual functionality and size of the olfactory bulb. It just really isn't that large, so it cannot process that much information. And given that Blake can now sniff out food that has been sitting out for over 7 years behind a door in what I'm assuming to be a freezer of sorts, although the power has been off for 7 years, but given the meat isn't like hanging completely decayed to the bone, it must be powered somewhat, but this would indicate that it is taking less scent molecules to activate the olfactory bulb, and this usually tells us possibly two things. The first is that this could be the neurons are more reactive to scent. If this is the case, then this would mean that the brain is still in its standard arrangement, but given what we will see later, what I actually believe this to be is the addition of new neurons. The olfactory bulb is growing, which sounds like not such a bad thing when you take into consideration if new neuronal growth takes place elsewhere, then this could disrupt conscious thought and even understanding of the world around you. So telling her to keep trying the radio, Upstairs, Ginger gets up and he tells her to go back to bed. Asking Charlotte if she got anybody on the CB, one must ask why Charlotte is standing at the end of the hallway like the Walmart yodel kid. Hammering a nail very poorly, Bro then smashes his hand as he drinks some water. He then hears a distant thumping noise. Turning around, the thumping noise continues, and the family is already passed out as he goes upstairs to see what is actually making all that racket. Heading into one of the bedrooms, someone's trapped in the closet, hopefully not a 2000 R&B singer. Opening the door, it's a spider. And it's a big spider. He enters the slumped phase as he remembers his dad has been gone for 7 years and he ate jerky exposed to the air. Brother, you have poisoned yourself. Alright, so he can hear spiders now. Let's discuss. Now, the standard operation of your ears is clearly not this sensitive. The brain has a pretty fair capacity to pick up and perceive sounds, but around the age of 40, a lot of your hearing has started to be affected. How do I know this? Because I'm getting older. Sound, when picked up via the auditory pathway, will transform the sound waves into electrical signals that run up the auditory nerve or the cranial nerve 8 and then head into the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is responsible for interpreting sound. Now, obviously, what I like about this whole process is your brain doesn't just start immediately producing a ton of neurons. I believe this process actually makes a lot of sense in some respects. It's in like the infection. So let me explain with an example of lifting weights. When you first start lifting weights, your body does not respond by immediately producing a ton of new muscle tissue. At first, you will notice an increase in strength before any sort of gains pretty much anywhere because your body is actually improving the mind-body connection first. This is accomplished through more dendritic connections being formed and motor neurons also building new connections to the muscle tissue. This innervation of the muscle tissue increases in density, but not in physical neurons. And this allows for the recruitment of more muscle tissue without having to increase the muscle mass. So you essentially are able to increase yourself by like 20% strength without actually getting bigger, so you don't have to use as many resources. And this process allows for you to get a fair amount of adaptation out of the structures that you already have before new mass needs to be added. So neurologically, you get stronger first before you get stronger concerning muscle. And this same process is happening in the brain post-infection. The neurons of the brain are now forming new connections, and while this does sound good, it would mean that old connections are likely being broken or pathways are being altered. It is known that during viral infections, if the neurons of the brain are specifically targeted, this can actually inspire new dendritic connections. Now, it's fairly complex, but essentially the virus can alter the dendritic spines and spine proteins. This forced, neuroplasticity, you could call it, means the virus that is currently circulating around Blake's body is inspiring the neuron to deviate outside of its standard behavior concerning its connections, leading to more branching from this neuron. Because this is the case, we can surmise that this is mostly neurological. That said, as the virus alters the connections, it also appears to, for the neurons, that they will divide and then alter, which we will see here momentarily. Either way, these more profound connections begin forming, meaning that when sound is heard, no matter how light, such as a spider's footfall, it can still be heard. This level of hearing would be unreal though. People breathing would be interpreted as constant screaming, which that sounds terrible. So hearing a distant howl, which given his hearing could be half a state away, he tells his family to be quiet as then he hears footfalls. A shadow then passes by as he can hear snarling outside. Seeing it pass the window, then heads to the door as it starts pulling him through the dog door. Why did you stand near that? Charlotte then starts going absolute cave woman on that, ooga-dooging the hell out of that thing by like hitting it 15 times in a row. Dude, Charlotte is goated. So anyways, he crawls away hyperventilating as everything then blacks out around him. Waking up the next morning, I'm not really sure why he has a USMC shirt on. Getting up, he is hearing distorted speech as then he finds Ginger passed out. This is some serious aphasia going on here, which you're probably wondering, Roanoke, what is aphasia? Glad you asked. Aphasia is horrific, but it does indicate what's going on. Aphasia is a communication disorder that actually stems from the language centers of the brain. Now, given that Blake is dealing with two main issues, this points to where the aphasia is taking place. Known as global aphasia, this means key areas of the brain, such as the Broca's area and Wernicke's area, have been affected. But what does that actually mean? Language and understanding of that language is a delicate balance that is difficult to understand how it could ever be lost until you lose it. It's sort of similar to describing to someone what the color green is without showing them green or saying just mix blue or yellow, because that still doesn't show you what green is. It just shows you how to make green. It's a concept that you just really can't understand until it happens, which hopefully for everyone's sake here, you never have to understand this. However, his inability to understand and then regain that, process process a little later on for a bit of time indicates that he has entered the stage where new neuronal connections are actively forming, and it's no longer just about dendritic connections. Because of this, the brain now has altered firing patterns, meaning that patterns associated with understanding speech and intent are completely lost. Because remember, it's not so much your neurons storing information, it's the pattern in which the signal moves through that is memory and understanding. When these are changed, that memory is lost. Spontaneously, it could be reformed if the connection is reestablished, but for Blake to be exhibiting aphasia indicates several new neurons have formed in this area of the brain, disrupting the standard firing pattern, making English sound completely alien to him. I believe it is Bruce Willis who actually has aphasia right now due to dementia currently, so it's not just added neurons that can cause the issue, it is brain damage that can cause the issue, it's the dying of neurons that can cause the issue. There's a lot of problems. But completely losing the ability to communicate with those around you and not understand them is absolutely horrifying. So as Blake sits there, his vision is also brighter than anything that humans have. Possibly this is due to the same issue that is taking place with the language areas of the brain, but in this case it's in the occipital lobe, which is now building more neurons. However, given that this is visual processing in the relation, while the world does look stranger, which argument does, he could still process what he's seeing, possibly even at a higher capacity. However, given the blue hue everything is kind of around him, this indicates that much like in the brain, possibly new rods, which are specialized cells in the eye's retinas, are beginning to form. So what are rods? Well, you have rods and cones in your eyes. Cones pick up colors and daylight and are more towards the center of your vision, whereas rods will be more in your peripheral vision and kind of operate within more low light levels. In fact, if you're ever trying to see something at night but having trouble, don't look directly at it. Instead, use the side of your vision and you'll likely be able to see it better due to the clustering of rods outside of your central vision. Given that his eyesight has changed to this capacity, it shows that the rods are also forming within the center of his vision as well. All of this indicates that neurologically he is changing, but other cells and structures are also beginning to divide as well. But we will talk about that in a second because our boy here is about to go full alpha. Calling out on the CB radio, Charlotte then reports that she thinks her husband was infected by an animal to nobody because nobody can even hear her. She then talks about how he can't talk and he doesn't even know he's sick either. So, spotting him, she then starts talking to him, but it makes no sense. He's also producing a low growling noise. Likely the larynx has begun forming new tissue as well as creating a much more low guttural noise. So basically with the increase in tissue in key areas as well as neurons, the finely tuned human form is struggling severely with issues of new cell buildup. She says she's worried because bro is most definitely becoming a werewolf. He then pees himself, see, an absolute alpha. He's marking his territory. As the Sigma, I'm not doing that. So putting him in a bed, bro's skin is looking a little rough too. And this is the longest night ever, by the way. Messing with his hair, it's also falling out, which is a perfect time to talk about our sponsor, Key. We have no sponsor for this. As she gives him a pen and paper to write with, he then writes that he is dying. The girlfriend reports, who is watching this with me, that he just has man flu. And you know what, ladies? It is as bad as they say. All right, man flu is real. So she says that she loves him and she doesn't want to do anything in her life without him. You know, real heartfelt speech. He can't hear any of it and everything is blue and her eyes are lighting up. This to me is rather interesting as given the level of cones and rods that he has in his eyes now, it appears as though the light that's reflecting off the back of her eye is then seen by his as bright white light. So eyes are known to glow with night vision devices. And this is due to the infrared, which means the standard 380 to 700 nanometers, which is the visual light spectrum, is essentially what our eyes can detect. And given what we are seeing, humans can see near infrared through the red cones that allow us to see a deeper shade of red. And as a result, more so given the rest of the changes, we can assume then that all cones have begun increasing in number. And with the increased visual processing of the brain, Blake has now achieved near infrared vision. So Ginger then comes in asking what's wrong with him, a lot. As Blake sits up, Ginger then asks if he's sick. Yes. He then just starts bleeding this time and checking his arm. The wound looks a bit infected. Grabbing his arm and going over into the corner, he starts scratching on it and going goblin mode as he starts biting his wound. His teeth then start falling out as he gets himself a nice slice of forearm jerky, and then as he looks at the other larger piece of jerky in the room with them, he just kind of walks past her on all levels, including physical. He is a wolf now. So as with the neurons, so with the rest of the body. The teeth that are falling out shows this infection has moved into the literal connective tissue of the body as well, increasing its density, which in turn, for structures that are anchored, may make them more loosely connected. In this case, the teeth, which are anchored to the jaw via the periodontal ligament and the cementum, are composed of collagen fibers. With the virus invading the body, the teeth have lost Their anchor points and new ones have begun to form in their place, which would be inspired by a completely separate genetic alteration. But how? Well, mitotic growth appears to be heavily influenced in the body, and given what we are seeing with his apparent degradation, we can assume the process probably looks a lot like this. There are several mitotic genes involved with the division of cells, but the main ones to focus on are either the cyclin genes or the CDK1 genes. Now, I always love talking about this because look, mitosis is mitosis, right? There's not much I can do about it. It doesn't change episode to episode. It's just what inspires mitosis. Whatever you do, don't go look up Roanoke gaming mitosis on Reddit. It's good God. People are angry about my ability to discuss mitosis because I'm not changing it enough. And I'm just like, bro, what am I supposed to say? So these promote mitosis as a whole, at least those genes do. And mitotic genes are regulated by signaling pathways that can be influenced by environmental cues, but in this case, it appears the virus may contain compatible transcription factors such as RUNX2, which regulates expression of the mitotic genes. They bind to DNA sequences and are known as promoters, which then activate these genes, forcing the cell to enter mitosis. Of course, interestingly, this process doesn't turn Blake into a cancerous mass, but instead has an end goal in terms of body structure and shape, which we will see. So saying his name, he then turns around as it seems he's somewhat himself now. Charlotte then walks off, looking outside, spotting a truck near the barn. Grabbing a knife, they then all head out there as Charlotte then shuts the door, closing off their only retreat point. Are you serious, gal? So making it to the truck, it's been 7 years. This gas is definitely donezo. And why is that? I'm glad you didn't ask. See, here's the weird thing about gas. Some people claim that they can use gas years later. Some claim after 6 months it goes bad. But basically what happens is the more volatile hydrocarbons in the fuel evaporates over time, and oxidation happens with the hydrocarbons as well as, everything else within them, which breaks them down. And this leads to fuel becoming more like varnish and have reduced combustibility. This process begins as little as 3 to 6 months in a sealed container, and if it's ethanol, it can go bad in 1 to 3 months. Now, it will still burn after that 3 to 6 months, but say goodbye to your injectors. So getting Ginger in the car, Blake is still crashing out in there. Also pretty sure that is a carbureted truck. Also, I'm like 58% sure this is like a 83 to 87 generation of Chevy truck. Somebody removed the front logo. Someone's also gonna have to check that. So bad fuel running through a carburetor? Good luck. So either way, with a little bit of work and some decent tires, this could also still be a nice truck. And to point out, the accelerator pump is totally screwed. So now you thought the werewolves in this movie were strong. Look at Charlotte. Put that battery in that thing. Batteries are not that light. So connecting the battery terminal, she then goes to start the truck, which has trouble turning over. You might want to pump the gas a few times. There you go. So Blake then starts werewolfing as she's able to get the truck running, casually grabbing the 41-pound battery like it is nothing with one arm, all in her, what is this, lateral deltoids. She then clears off the windshield as it's Wolfman time. As he breaks through the window, I've been told he broke something, but I don't believe it, besides the window. Making a run for it, they then climb onto the most secure of structures, the plastic greenhouse, as then they pull the ladder up. The Wolfman is in the greenhouse trying to figure out how to get them. And this greenhouse is not certified for a werewolf attack, and then starts slicing the plastic as Blake is looking pretty rough up there at this point too. Ginger almost goes down into the greenhouse as then they pull her back up. Blake then tells them to go to the house as he takes off running to lead it away. Or go back to the perfectly running truck with just a broken windshield and get out of there. Perfect option, in my humble opinion. So, hearing a fight break out in the woods, someone is getting their tail absolutely kicked. Ginger then screams at Charlotte for leaving him out there, base to daughter, as Charlotte then looks out and sees Blake. Letting him back inside, Blake is looking, again, rough around the edges. As Ginger goes to check on him, he continues breathing pretty roughly. Looking at him, mandible is jutting and teeth have begun growing in. Ginger then goes to touch his head as she asks what she's thinking right now. However, everything she says is distorted to hell as the lights are flashing really bright. He can't hear anything and the gal is pretty much talking just into the void. As he continues to change, his nails grow as then he throws up blood and a finger. Tasty. He squares up on Charlotte for a second as he is almost lost in the sauce, which nice billy goat beard there. As then he comes back to, this is the skin of a killer, Charlotte, as he's officially in the awkward grow out stage of hair. Opening the door, however, another werewolf is there as it attacks him. Knocking him down, Charlotte then stabs him with a knife as then they go to run. Ah, Blake bit his fingers off, so the werewolf is angry. Blake then gets knocked out as the werewolf goes after Ginger, but so far, Charlotte is the only one here doing anything. Prior to the attack on her, Blake is able to bite into the other werewolf's neck, pulling out some of the trachea, taking him out in the process. Checking the tattoo, he realizes that it's his old man, and he was turned into a werewolf. Blake now throws deuces to the whole situation as he attempts to get away from the house, but only makes it a few steps outside before his entire skeletal system starts rearranging itself. And this is literally a crackhead werewolf. Please tell me they grow more hair at some point. So then he looks out into the woods. He's literally got all the disadvantages of being human and like 4 advantages of being a werewolf. Bro, I think one of the major things here is the combination of bodily changes. First, we can assume that since the connective tissue density has increased, as well as the muscle mass and motor neuron connections, this has allowed for his body in turn to move bones into different locations. I think what we were seeing in this instance is literally muscle pulling bone apart. However, given that mitosis has been increased across the entirety of the body, I think it's safe to assume that the bone would be rapidly healing, which for all intents and purposes would require a massive intake of nutrition. So this part, little unbelievable, but then again, that's kind of what this whole channel is. And this really hasn't stopped us before. So as the bone weakens in this process, it is likely that it is broken and pulled into different directions and in different structures. At first, this would put the werewolf down for a little bit, but as the bones would heal in their new configuration, it's pretty clear that this would happen rapidly given what we were seeing with also the nail growth. This assumed virus would absolutely have to invade the DNA of a person in my opinion, but we will also talk about the virus more in depth here momentarily. So Ginger then starts asking why Blake had to get sick. Charlotte then tells Ginger about how Blake's dad went out into the woods, with Ginger saying she wants him back the way he was. Well, that's probably not happening. So as they hug it out, the power then shuts off, and looking out the window, player 2 has re-entered the game. Blake is now the new werewolf in town, and he's hungry for who flesh. So getting into the house almost immediately, and with very little effort, he slinks down the stairs as Charlotte then grabs a knife. Turning left, here's Blake. He reaches out for Ginger as she slices his hand, as then they lock him inside and run for the barn. Or that perfectly running truck over there. Whichever. Not the truck? Okay then. So I guess the creepy barn with very little preventing him from getting in is preferable. So grabbing a chain and a few other odds and ends, Blake is now at the barn door. Yeah, it took him like no time to break through that wood as then he starts digging to get in. Meanwhile, they can't see him, but Blake is like right in front of him. Interestingly, the faces change and are somewhat elongated and do not look very human at all. He then which you're probably wondering, I should probably tell you that. Why don't they really look familiar to him, I guess is the best way to put it. So human eyesight is as much interpretation as it is actually like seeing things, right? So one of the greatest examples we can point to is a man who was blind his entire life actually got his vision restored. I believe it was like around his 40s. And I've mentioned this prior, but essentially after his vision was restored, he couldn't see. Everything was too bright and overwhelming, and he had like no idea what anything was because those connections in his mind were never made. So everything was completely new and he didn't really have anything to base it off of. So because of that, things looked like blobs, they would fade in and out of focus. It was basically his brain trying to figure out what everything is. Now it's been like over a decade, I believe at this point, since that has happened. So he probably has now the ability to see just like anybody else, but it's essentially like when your brain doesn't know what something is, it doesn't know how to quantify it, and it can change it into other things. Your vision is as much your reality, I guess, that you think something is, as it is literal visual information coming in and being interpreted. So with his brain being altered to this capacity, this is also changing the faces of the people that he once knew, because his new reality is to see things differently. So coming at them, he then steps on a bear trap as he turns on the flashlight, but he is stuck now. As he goes to mess with the trap, he decides the best course of action is to bite off his own foot. Charlotte and Ginger then keep running, but with his foot gone, Blake is a bit nerfed now, as then he starts crawling at a high rate of speed. And I mean, I feel like now you could outrun him. Losing track of them for a moment, he then lets out a howl as Charlotte, do not stop running. But seeing the deer blind, they find Derek's arm, and now they are back at the truck. Man, it's just been one giant circle today. Looking around for his handheld, Ginger then alerts her mother that Blake is in fact coming, as he's now up on the truck. Grabbing Man's answer to the werewolf menace, they begin hoofing it towards the deer blind, as then he crawls in the distance. Back in the deer blind, like back in the day, his hand comes over the top as Charlotte then squares up, poking his less than beautiful face over. She doesn't pull the trigger immediately, as then he looks at Ginger. Ginger then tells her mom that he wants this to be over. He then makes a move as she fires a shot straight into him. You sure that's gonna end that situation? I mean, with werewolves, it may call for a double tap. They then cry over the loss of Blake as he's still on the ground, likely in a great amount of pain. Touching his head, I wouldn't be doing that. He looks up at the trees and then lets out a raspy breath and drops as a result of the new amount of lead concentration that has rapidly built up within his body. They cry over their father, and I have to say, pretty weak werewolf all in all. So walking through Hidden Valley, they then look out and see that it is in fact beautiful, and thus concludes Wolfman. So ultimately, what is Face of the Wolf, or was it Hill's Fever, really? Well, I think this can be explained if we look at the likely behavior of anyone who is a wolf man. Given that their claws grow fairly long and their propensity to tear things apart, it's quite likely a werewolf could spread this disease through slashes due to saliva being on its claws, meaning that the claws themselves are laden with the virus. Now, it's not rabies this time. Again, you're crushed. I know, because rabies induces issues through inflammation and neural disruption. However, this virus clearly resides within the mouth of a person, and once administered through either a claw swipe or a bite, it enters the bloodstream where it heads to the brain. Much like a standard herpes virus, or really any virus that enters the brain, well, at least neurons, it is able to reside in there as the immune system is not capable of clearing it, as this is considered an immune privileged site. This is to protect the neurons from harm caused by the immune system itself. Entering the neurons, it could inspire dendritic branching at first, interconnecting the brain more densely, and then it is highly likely that new neurons would begin to form entirely. This would allow for new traits to be acquired, but old abilities like language skills and communication, as well as memory of who you even are, and logical conscious thought, all of these are going to be disrupted due to the new neurons altering firing patterns of the brain. As this process continues, the person will lose more and more of themselves, ultimately devolving, so to speak, back into becoming an animal. Once this process is done, there really is no saving the person, because the issue is, even if you were to clear the virus, structurally, they have changed, and neurologically, they would never be the same. The virus itself, given its ability to invade almost every form of cell, very likely also disrupts the immune system to a degree, much like how HIV targets CD4 and CD8 T cells, preventing the immune system from responding correctly. It is likely this virus does the same thing. There appears to be an innate immune response at first, but the adaptive never comes. Once this process has entrenched itself deeply enough, starting with the brain, the overall cellular mass of the body is increased, making them stronger but horrifically altering their appearance, at least of their face and head, before moving on to the limbs. This culminates in a creature that is stronger and faster than the average human, but it's not immortal. At the end of the day, it is still a human that has had many systems altered, but still needs its metabolism and biological processes to continue in order to survive. By introducing lead to the body, you can disrupt all of these, leading to the end of that person. So basically, they are infected, but they are not supernatural. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. What did you think of my theory? I think they are absolutely still human. No shot they're not. So I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales, and Roanoke Games links where I live stream in the description. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. Again, first, I want to thank our astronaut, Bananas Are Epic. Thank you, my man. Next, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer. And then I'd like to thank our scientist, Dakota23, Frank Shaftcrank, Invictus Echo, which, by the way, Frank Crankshaft would, like, that would roll off the tongue so much better. Anyways, Invictus Echo, Metric System, Ocean Gate was a cover-up for an anglerfish attack, Official Texan, and Stutz. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate your guys' support as well. You're absolute ballers, so thank you. But all right, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll see y'all in the next one.